I saw the photo just after midnight, all their smiling faces, around the table I cooked for. But mine, cropped clean out, not blurred, not missed by mistake, no. You could see the edge of my sleeve in the corner, you could see the dish I had placed with my own hands, but me, gone. I didn't call anyone. I didn't comment. I didn't even flinch. I just sat there with the light of that phone burning into my face and the silence sitting heavy on my chest. It wasn't the first time I felt invisible. But this time, it was public. Deliberate. Proud. I got up. Walked across the house barefoot. Quiet. Like I didn't want to wake the version of myself that used to accept this kind of thing. I opened the safe. Took out the old envelope. The one with the names I had written in hope and loyalty. And I started crossing them out. One by one. Because if I wasn't good enough to be in the picture, they weren't good enough to be in the will. Thank you for sitting with me. I know you could be anywhere, watching anything right now, but you're here with me. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd like to think you're settled somewhere warm, ready to hear a story that might feel a little too familiar. Have you ever done everything, cleaned, cooked, prepared with love, only to feel like you weren't really wanted when the day came? If you've ever poured your whole heart into a day, only to feel like a stranger in the middle of it, then you'll understand what I'm about to say. Sit with me. Let me tell you how it all began. It was the night before Thanksgiving. I'd just finished ironing the lace runner for the table. My hands were sore, but I kept going. I had my list of groceries already checked twice. The turkey was marinating. The silver was polished. Everything was in its place. I didn't ask for help. I knew better. One of the daughter-in-laws texted, "Let me know if you need help with the pies." I just stared at the message. I replied, "No thank you." Not because I had it all covered, but because, after a while, asking feels like begging. And I wasn't going to beg for hands that only show up for pictures. The house felt heavy that night. Not sad, just still. Like it was holding its breath. And deep down, so was I. Thanksgiving morning came, and I was already in the kitchen before the sun showed its face. The smell of butter, cinnamon, and roasted garlic filled the house. The good dishes were laid out. I'd even tied little ribbons around the napkins, just like I used to when they were younger and easier to please. They started showing up around 2. Late, but smiling like they were right on time. Not one of them brought what they said they would. The one who promised sweet potatoes came empty-handed. The one who said he'd pick up drinks brought a half-empty bottle of soda from the back seat of his car. I smiled and said, "No problem," but my hands tightened around the dish towel. I served them anyway. Made their plates, passed the gravy, refilled glasses without being asked. No one offered to help me up from the table. No one asked if I'd eaten yet. I just kept moving. Kept smiling, because that's what I've always done. I sat down at the far end of the table, not at the head, just at the edge where I could keep an eye on everything. I watched them talk over each other, scroll through their phones, whisper jokes I wasn't meant to hear. One of the grandkids told a story I'd heard before, only now it was hers. Like she'd lived it instead of me. Then someone stood up, holding a phone, and said, "Let's take a group photo." Everyone rushed in. Chairs scraped the floor, laughter echoed off the walls. I was in the kitchen doorway, adjusting the last tray. I looked up just in time to see the flash. They didn't ask me to come in for another one. They didn't say, "Grandma, we'll wait." They didn't even glance back. I figured it was nothing. Just a rushed moment, a forgetful slip. I'd been giving people the benefit of the doubt for so long, it came easy. I wiped my hands, checked the oven, and walked back in with dessert like nothing had happened. I didn't know they'd post that photo that same night. I didn't know they'd tag each other with little hearts and captions that said, "Grateful for family," and "Couldn't do life without these people." I didn't know they'd cut the photo just enough so the corner of my shoulder stayed in, but not my face. And I sure didn't know that not one of them would notice. Or maybe they did. Either way, the message was loud. Louder than anything they said to me that day. It was late, just after midnight. The kind of quiet where even the house feels asleep. I had finally kicked off my shoes, rubbed the soreness out of my knees, and made myself a cup of tea I didn't even finish. I sat in that same corner of the couch where I always sit, my quiet spot. The TV was off, the lights were low, and out of habit, I reached for my phone. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just scrolling, just breathing. That's when I saw it. The photo. It was posted by one of the grandkids. The caption said, "Family is everything." Big smiles, warm glow, my dining table, my lace runner, the turkey I basted for 3 hours. My pecan pie sitting untouched at the edge of the table. But me? I wasn't in it. Not my face, not even my full shoulder, just a piece of my sleeve, barely in the corner, like I had accidentally wandered through the frame and they forgot to crop me out completely. I stared at it for a long time. Longer than I probably should have. At first, I thought maybe it was just that one photo. Maybe I'd stepped away. Maybe I was in the next one. So I clicked the arrow. Another photo. Same table, different angle. Same smiles. Same empty space where I had been sitting, but this time cropped tighter. I clicked again and again. Each one more edited than the last. Like they were trying to prove something to the world. Like their happiness had to be clean, curated, filtered. And I didn't fit the image. There were 10 photos total. 10. Not a single one with me in them. Not one tag, not one mention in the caption. Not even a thank you in the comments. Just hearts and smiley faces and comments like, "This is beautiful," and "What a perfect family," and "You all look amazing." And they did. They looked like a family who had come together, who had shared a meal, who had laughed and made memories. But I saw it for what it really was. A moment staged for strangers. A snapshot of something that didn't include me, even though I was the one who had made it possible. That was when it hit me. I was there. I poured the drinks, refilled the bowls, cleaned the spills, brought out extra chairs. I was there, but I wasn't part of them anymore. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I didn't send a message asking why. I just sat there, the glow of the screen lighting up my face, and let it all settle in. The truth. The weight. The silence. Sometimes the loudest betrayal doesn't come from shouting or slamming doors. It comes in the form of a photo, where you were supposed to be, but simply weren't. I sat there for a long while. No sound but the clock ticking and the tea that had gone cold on the side table. My phone lay face down, like it had said enough for one night. But my mind, it didn't go quiet, it wandered. Wandered back to birthdays with balloons taped to the ceiling, and me standing over a cake with a spoon in one hand and a camera in the other. Not because I wanted to be in the pictures, but because I wanted everyone else to be remembered. I was always the one behind the lens, making sure the candles were lit, the smiles were bright, and the gifts were opened in the right order so no one felt left out. I thought about the times I helped cover rent. Quietly, slipping money into envelopes, sometimes even leaving it in coat pockets so they wouldn't feel embarrassed. They always said thank you, like they'd pay me back, but they never did. I never reminded them. I remembered tuition payments, school forms, late-night drives to dorm rooms, packing meals in plastic containers because cafeteria food didn't taste like home. I remembered dropping them off and crying the whole ride back. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. And now they toast wine without me. Now they write captions like, "Thankful for my tribe," and "Family forever," while the one who held it all together is nowhere to be seen. Not even in the background. Not even by accident. I got up and walked slowly to the bookshelf near the fireplace. On the bottom shelf, behind some old cookbooks, there's a box. It's not labeled, but I know exactly what's inside. My photo album. The one I made by hand over the years. Glue-sticked corners, handwritten notes, ticket stubs, birthday cards folded between pages. I opened it. There was a picture of the twins on their first day of kindergarten, wearing backpacks I saved 2 months to buy. A picture of the whole family on the porch. One I had set up with a timer, running into frame at the last second. My hair was sticking up in the back. I didn't care. I was in it. We were all in it. I flipped through more pages. There was a Christmas where we had nothing but still managed to smile. A barbecue where everyone brought something small and we made it stretch. A hospital room photo where I had sat up in bed, IV in my arm, just to make sure no one felt uncomfortable. I looked at those pictures and realized something. Back then, I made sure every face was seen, every arm was touched, every name was written. Now, the only thing written is a caption with hearts and filters and a version of family I don't recognize. And maybe that's what hurts the most. Not that they forgot me in a moment, but that they've been slowly erasing me for years, picture by picture, post by post, until one day, I simply vanished. The morning after Thanksgiving, I moved slower than usual. Not because my legs were stiff, though they were, but because my spirit felt heavy. I didn't open the blinds. I didn't warm up the leftovers. I just sat by the window, wrapped in my shawl, holding a cup I never drank from. The kind of stillness that makes even the walls seem like they're holding their breath. I hadn't said a word to anyone. No texts, no calls, and none came in return. Then, just before noon, there was a soft knock at the door. Not the rushed kind people use when they're in a hurry, or the loud kind when they want to be heard. No. This one was gentle, thoughtful, the kind of knock that asks permission before asking for your time. It was Helen. She lives 2 houses down. We've shared fence gossip, borrowed sugar, waved from porches for years. She doesn't use Facebook. She still writes checks at the store. Her world moves slower, and for that, I've always been grateful. She had a small plate in her hand, covered with foil. I made too much, she said, even though we both knew that wasn't true. Turkey's drier today, but the stuffing held up. I stepped aside, and she walked in like she'd done it 100 times. No questions, no explanations. She set the plate down and looked around the room. You didn't eat? I shook my head. I couldn't even lie. She sat down, smoothed her skirt, and folded her hands in her lap. Then she said, "Want me to sit with you today?" I didn't answer right away. I just sat. And so did she. No phones, no background noise, no small talk about weather or sales or what the neighbors were up to. We just sat. It was the kind of silence you don't rush, the kind that holds you steady. We shared a slice of cornbread between us, didn't even warm it up. Just broke it with our hands and chewed in peace. She didn't ask why I looked tired. She didn't ask what was wrong. And I didn't offer anything either. Because it wasn't her words that mattered. It was her being there. No filter, no pose, no camera ready to capture the moment and claim credit for kindness. Just presence. That kind of quiet companionship is rare. The kind that doesn't need a reason or a backstory. The kind that doesn't try to fix what can't be fixed. It just stays, gently, until the ache softens a little, and that day, that's all I needed. Someone to see me, without needing me to explain what they missed. After Helen left, I sat alone for a while longer. The house was quiet again, but something inside me had started to move. Not loud, not angry, just steady. Like a wheel finally turning after sitting stuck in the dirt for too long. I walked down the hallway past the photos that hadn't been updated in years. Not because I didn't care, but because at some point, I stopped being part of the new ones. I paused at the door to my bedroom, looked around, then opened the closet and reached for the small metal safe tucked into the corner. I hadn't opened that thing in years. Not since I got my affairs in order, like they told us to at church. Just in case, they said. Just so your family doesn't have to scramble. I remembered the day I sat at the dining table. Papers spread out, pen in hand, trying to make sure everything was fair. That every name on that will felt loved and remembered. That no one would feel left out. I pulled out the folder. It was thicker than I remembered. The paper had yellowed a bit at the edges. My handwriting had started to fade, but the names were still there. Each one written with a kind of tenderness I don't think they ever knew I carried. I sat on the bed, unfolded the pages, and started reading. There was my oldest's name. He was always the responsible one, until responsibility became an excuse to keep distance. My middle boy, he used to bring me flowers when he got paid. Now he brings excuses. Too busy, too tired, too far. And the youngest, my baby. The one who used to hold my pinky when we crossed the street. His name was still there too. Even though he hadn't called in months, not even on my birthday. Their children's names followed, little ones I once rocked to sleep. Who used to light up when they saw me walk in the room. Now they scroll past my messages and wave at me like I'm an old neighbor they barely remember. As I read, something in my chest tightened. Not with rage, not even sadness, just a kind of clarity. It was a story I had written from a place of loyalty. A version of love that had gone unpaid for too long. And sitting there, with their names staring back at me like they still deserved a piece of me, I hadn't even been invited to share. I knew what I had to do. I didn't shred the paper, I didn't crumple it or tear it up in a fit. No, I rewrote it. Slowly, carefully, one line at a time. with hands that didn't shake and a heart that finally stopped asking why. Because sometimes love changes shape. Sometimes what was once written in hope needs to be rewritten in truth. That same night, after I folded the new version of the will and placed it back into the safe, I sat back down in the living room. The air felt lighter, not joyful, just still. Like something heavy had been set down after being carried for far too long. I picked up my phone. Not to call, not to check if anyone had finally noticed I'd gone quiet. I opened Facebook, and I took a deep breath. I didn't scroll this time. I went straight to my friends list. Straight to the names that used to mean something. Names that were once written on birthday cakes and Christmas envelopes. Names that I used to check on when they went silent, used to pray over when I didn't hear from them. I clicked the first one, my oldest. His profile picture was a smiling family shot. That same photo from Thanksgiving, me cropped out. His caption still read, "Grateful for every blessing." I clicked unfriend. Then the next, and the next. Unfriend, unfriend, unfollow. I didn't block them. No, blocking would have been too kind. Blocking would have made it easy for them to believe I had disappeared. I wanted them to look. I wanted them to notice the absence. I wanted the silence to ring so loud it echoed every time they scrolled past my name and found nothing there. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about making a point. It was about peace, my peace. I kept going. Nieces, nephews, in-laws, cousins I hadn't heard from in months, but who always had something to say in group chats when it was time to split expenses or assign duties at reunions. Gone. All of them. Then I sat back. Waited. About 10 minutes later, a message popped up. It was my niece. She wrote, "Auntie, are you okay? I saw you unfriended everyone." I stared at the screen for a moment. Then typed back, "I'm just tidying up." No smiley face, no apology. Just those 4 words. And I meant every one of them. Because sometimes silence says more than any long explanation. Sometimes the quiet is the answer they pretended not to hear all along. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt clean. It didn't take long before the silence started making noise. The next morning, the family group chat lit up like it always does when something shifts and they're not in control of it. I didn't even have to open it fully. The preview alone told me everything. Why did Mom unfriend everyone? Is she mad about something? Somebody needs to call her. I watched the messages stack up one after the other. None of them directed to me. Just tossed around like I wasn't in the room. Like I was a topic. A glitch. A sudden inconvenience they couldn't explain. Then my phone rang. It was my oldest. He rarely calls unless there's an announcement, a wedding, a bill, or someone needs help with something that requires my name, not my presence. This time, I let it ring. No rush to answer. Then I did something I never thought I would. I went back to that Thanksgiving post. That perfect picture, with their smiles wide and their arms around each other. The table I set. The meal I made. My empty chair. My pie untouched at the edge. I took a screenshot. I opened the message thread with my son, and I sent it. No caption. No emojis. No explanation. Just the truth. He replied a few minutes later. "Really, Mom? You're overreacting." That was the word. Overreacting. That word that people love to use when they don't want to look at what they did. When they want you to shrink, to apologize for how deeply something hurt, just because it didn't hurt them. I stared at the message. Typed nothing. Because I've learned something in all my years. Sometimes silence is stronger than a paragraph. Sometimes not replying is the clearest answer a person can give. And at that moment, I didn't feel petty. I didn't feel dramatic. I didn't feel old or overly emotional or too sensitive. I felt awake, present, grounded. And I thought to myself, I'd rather be quiet than be dismissed. A few days passed. The messages slowed down. The calls stopped. No one followed up. No one came by. And that silence, it didn't hurt like it used to. It just confirmed what I already knew. So I picked a day, got dressed, and took a ride downtown. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Just slipped my handbag over my shoulder, folded a copy of the revised names into my purse, and walked out the door like I was going to the store. When I stepped into the attorney's office, the assistant greeted me with a warm smile. She remembered me. Said it had been a while. I told her some things had changed. She nodded. Offered me water. I said no, thank you. I waited quietly in the room with the leather chairs and the ticking clock on the wall. Funny how lawyers' offices always smell like paper and quiet decisions. He came in, shook my hand, asked how I was doing. I said I was ready to make an update. Nothing dramatic, just some small adjustments that spoke a little closer to the truth. We sat down at the desk. I unfolded the paper I had rewritten the night after Thanksgiving. My handwriting was neater than I remembered. Clear, steady, it felt good. I told him who to remove, no bitterness in my voice, just names that no longer belonged to the part of me that gives. And then I told him who to add. Helen, I said her full name. Spelled it slowly. Her address, the one 2 doors down. The one who showed up with no camera in her hand and no questions in her mouth. The one who sat beside me when I didn't have the strength to ask for it. He looked up from his notes, asked softly, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm more sure about this than I've been about anything in years." And before he printed the papers, I asked for one more thing. A handwritten note, something I wanted tucked inside the file with the final version. I wrote it slowly, not to make it fancy, but to make it true. It said, "Presence matters more than promises. Gratitude matters more than blood." And I meant every word. I didn't do it out of spite. I didn't do it to punish anyone. I did it because at some point, you have to stop waiting to be seen by people who keep looking past you. You have to love the ones who showed up with nothing but their heart. And love them back with everything you've got. That day, I didn't walk out of the attorney's office bitter or broken. I walked out lighter, straighter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had finally given something to someone who wouldn't need a holiday or a hashtag to remember me. When I got back from the attorney's office, the house looked the same. But something inside me had changed. Not in a loud way, not in a way anyone would notice from the outside. But I felt it. Like a breath I'd been holding for years had finally been released, quiet and complete. I walked through the living room, looking at the pictures on the wall, the family portraits, the group shots from holidays past, some faded, some framed with care, but all of them telling a story that didn't feel true anymore. Not because the moments didn't happen, but because the love in them had long since dried up. Smiles taken for the camera. Arms wrapped around one another while I stood in the kitchen refilling plates. I stood there for a long while, just looking. Then I took them down, one by one. Gently. No anger in my hands. No tears either. Just a calm knowing that it was time. I wrapped them in old newspaper and slid them into a box, not because I wanted to throw them away, but because they no longer belonged on my walls. They were chapters I'd already lived. Stories that didn't need to keep staring back at me every time I passed by. I went to the hallway closet and pulled out a smaller box. One that hadn't been opened in years. Inside were the photos I kept tucked away, ones nobody ever asked about. There was a black and white picture of me as a girl, standing barefoot on a wooden porch, holding a basket of eggs. There was one of my wedding day, my husband's smile big and boyish, mine quiet but sure. I found a newer one too, from just a few weeks ago. Helen and I sitting on the front porch, each holding a cup of coffee, looking like we didn't have a care in the world. No captions, no filters, just real life caught in stillness. I put those on the walls instead. Not to erase the past, but to make space for the version of myself I had too often put aside. Later that week, I went out to the backyard. The soil was still good, the sun reached the fence line just right. I rolled up my sleeves and started a small garden. Tomatoes, collards, rosemary, nothing too big, just enough to grow something with my own hands again. Something that didn't ask for applause, just care. Neighbors waved when they saw me kneeling in the dirt. I waved back, dirt under my nails and sweat on my brow. And for once I didn't feel the need to rush inside and fix myself. I just stayed there, in the sun, grounded in the moment. They'll say I became distant, some already have. They'll whisper that I've pulled away, that I'm not the same. And maybe I'm not. But the truth is, I didn't become distant. I just became free. Free from trying to keep a place at tables where I was only wanted for tradition, not presence. Free from waiting for messages that don't come and gratitude that never grew roots. Free from measuring my worth by how often I'm mentioned or how loudly they say my name. This house, these walls, this porch, this little patch of garden, it's mine again. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I belong here. It was a Thursday afternoon, almost a week after Thanksgiving, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't look right away. I was in the kitchen, peeling apples for a pie I was making just for myself. No reason. Just because I wanted something warm and sweet in the house. The knock came gently, hesitant, like someone unsure whether they should be there. I wiped my hands on a towel, took my time walking to the door. When I opened it, there he was, my oldest, standing there with a bouquet of flowers that looked like they'd come from one of those last-minute grocery bins. Bright, pretty. Just enough effort to seem thoughtful, but not enough to feel real. "Hey, Mom," he said, like he always did when he wanted something or wasn't sure how to start. I didn't smile, but I didn't frown either. I just stepped aside and let him in. He held the flowers like they were a ticket. I pointed toward the old ceramic pitcher by the sink. He placed them in, without a word. We sat down in the living room. The space looked different now, with the new photos and none of theirs. He noticed. His eyes moved along the walls, then back to me. He cleared his throat. "You know we didn't mean it like that." I didn't respond right away, just stood up and asked, "Would you like some tea?" He nodded. "Sure." I poured 2 cups, set them on the table between us. We sat in silence as the tea cooled slightly. He didn't touch his right away, just stared down at it like he was waiting for it to speak first. Finally I said, "You didn't mean to post a photo without me in it." He looked up quickly. "No, I mean, we weren't trying to hurt you. It wasn't personal." I nodded slowly. "But I was there. You chose not to see me. That's all the meaning I needed." He looked like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to defend himself, but he didn't. He just sat there, quiet, the weight of the truth pressing into the space between us. I didn't yell, I didn't ask why. I didn't tell him about the will or the safe or the quiet Sundays that led to that night. I didn't need to. He sipped his tea once, said it tasted different. I told him I'd use ginger this time, said nothing more. After a while he stood up, said he had to go, said he'd check in soon. I walked him to the door, watched him open it, hesitate, then walk down the steps without looking back. He left unsettled, not angry, not upset, just faced with something he couldn't unsee. And I closed the door behind him with the same stillness I'd been holding since Thanksgiving night. Not out of coldness, but out of clarity. Because some visits aren't about apology. They're about finally being seen, and knowing that even then, the moment has passed. The evening came slow, like it always does when the day's been full of thought. I stepped out onto the porch with a blanket across my lap and a warm cup of tea in my hands. The breeze was soft, the kind that wraps around your shoulders like someone who remembers how to hold you without needing a reason. The porch light had already come on. That little glow. It's never been much, but it's always been enough. Just like me, I suppose. I sat back in my rocking chair and looked out at the sky, thinking about everything and nothing at once. Then I looked straight ahead. Not at the yard, not at the trees, but at you. Have you ever been erased from a photo you helped make possible? Sat at the table, filled the glasses, carved the meat, and still ended up invisible in the only memory they decided to keep? I used to chase invitations, holidays, birthdays, baby showers. I used to wait for them to remember me, to include me, to notice when I was missing. But not anymore. Now I just create peace. Peace in the way I hang my curtains, peace in the way I pick my tomatoes, peace in the names I keep and the ones I quietly release. They think quiet means weak. They think silence is surrender. But quiet just means I've made my decision. And I have. If this story found you, maybe it's because part of it belongs to you too. So tell your story below. I'll be reading, I always do. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Granny Stories. This porch light, it stays on for the ones who were cropped out, but never left behind.